we tie these things together, these external forces, and we tie our value, we tie our worthiness to external things that we have zero control over, right? And the guy I was talking to yesterday, he was talking about these, he listed about 10 different external things that I won't get into all the details of what he said, but all these external situations of which he has zero control over, that he was like, oh, I should have done that, should have done this, should have done this. And it was like, okay, well, based on what you knew at the time, based on what you were doing and what you believed at the time, what you knew to be true, did you act as best you could? And he was like, well, I guess, yeah. I'm like, but knowing what I know now, I'm like, no, take that aside. Forget what you know now, because ultimately you learned a lesson, right? And now with that new knowledge or that new awareness, yes, absolutely, you would act differently if you knew if we knew the future. Wouldn't we act differently? Like if I knew that Google stock or Apple stock or Amazon stock was going to go where they are now, back in 2004, I would have absolutely bought a lot more of it. But hindsight's 2020 for a reason, right? So we can only act based on our awareness and what we know to be true right now. None of us can see the future. None of us know for sure what's going to happen in the future. And so we can't act according to what we know is true retroactively. And so when you tie your external value to things you can't control, you're giving up control over your worthiness, over your value. And so naturally, you're going to eventually feel like crap, right? You're going to look at yourself as as not invaluable, as lacking value, as unworthy, as, not good enough, because you're tying your value to these things that you have no control over. If I tied my value to Apple stock, what control do I have over Apple stock, right? I have zero control over it. So Apple could go up or down, and then I'm like, oh, I feel shit about myself today. Oh, today I feel great because Apple's up. And tomorrow's like, oh, I feel like crap because Apple's down. But then I don't have any control over that. Nothing I do is going to change that. And so I'm giving up all control to some external force that doesn't really matter to me ultimately, because ultimately at the end of the day, I don't care what Apple stock does unless I have money involved in it. But either way, that's again external. Money is also external. All these other success factors that other people define for us are external to us. And so going back to the should and shouldn't, when you should on yourself, and I say this a lot, don't should on yourself, right? Because you're shoulding on yourself. You're literally shitting on yourself because you're making yourself feel like shit because of things you think you should or shouldn't have done. Social media, and everyone can quote me on this, social media is bullshit. Okay? It's absolute bullshit. You're seeing these people posting at their best times in their lives. You're not seeing people who post, hey, I had a really rough day today. Some people do, and that's great because they're actually being vulnerable and actually letting people know that, hey, things are not always rosy and wonderful, because they're not always rosy and wonderful. If you think of that person who's posting only wonderful beach pics or all the travel pics in the world and all these amazing views, guess what? They have bad days too, and they're not going to post those, understandably. But you're only seeing a very slanted view of the world, and you're going to understand that there are things where you are going to have a rough day. You're going to have time when you need to sleep in extra sometimes. You're going to have times when you need to sit there and you say, you know what? I need to cancel a couple of my meetings to take a couple hours back to myself, or spend time with my kids, or spend time with my dog, or just go for a walk and just be alone for a while. Because we as human beings have to recharge. We have to have that time for ourselves. And if we don't see that, if we don't force ourselves to do that, because it's very tempting to get into this thing of like, oh, everyone on social media, all the business owners on social media saying, get up early, grind. Yeah, no days off. That sounds great. But anyone who has no days off for too long is going to go insane. As Naheed said, you're going to have physical pain. You're going to have mental pain. You're going to have headaches. You might have you make yourself sick, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times you see the people online and they're and kudos to them if they can actually do this every single day, but you're only seeing the best version of them. So don't feel like that's reality, because social media is not reality. Social media is going to be honestly like 80% lies, you know what I mean? Or exaggerations. And you're looking at this and you're saying, oh, I gotta do that. I want that. And it's so easy to turn to the shoulds. I should be doing that. I should do this more. I should do that. And you see all these posts, like these business mindset things where it's like, oh, 80 ways to make $10 million a month just by sitting at home on the couch. And it's like, yeah, not really. That's kind of not actually the case, because to sit on the couch, you have to actually do like 10 years of work to do that first. And you listen to some people and they're like, oh, I just use a $1 million loan from my dad, or $100,000 here that I started with. It was a very small amount of money. To who? Right? I mean, if you have the means to start that way, then absolutely great. That's a great advantage to have. But understand that not everyone's coming from that advantage, and you have to get to that point where you're able to have that time, that energy, that business, that read those resources. That's what I'm looking for. Sorry, the word I'm looking for. Resources to invest in that stuff and to start that place. And in this country, we don't, and most countries, honestly, in terms of primary education, you don't necessarily train leaders. You train followers, right? You train kids to say, I'm just gonna do whatever my teacher says because they said it. That was a problem I had as a kid. I got in a lot of trouble because I always asked why are we doing this? What's the point? And they're like, no, don't ask why. I do it because I said so. Because I said so is not an answer. As a parent, it might be an answer, but still, it's just like, explain why, right? There's value in that. And, it's something where you grow up with that. And then over time that should becomes a thing. It's like, you should do this because you were told to do it. And that's enough of a reason. So now you should do it. And so now all these gurus out there who are telling you should do this, should wake up at 4 a.m., you should, do all these other things you need to do. Now you're like, oh, well, I should do that. So I'm going to listen to what they say no matter what. And it tends to have that effect on the psyche, like Naheed said. So